Aakar Patel, the chair of Amnesty International in India, author, activist, and bitter critic of the Modi government, will be allowed to travel outside India. We'll be talking to Mr. Patel in moments from now, but let's bring you up to speed with what's happened in the courts. A Delhi court has declared that the lookout circular that had stopped Aakar Patel from traveling abroad will be put in abeyance. The court has said that Aakar Patel will be allowed to travel abroad. However, unlike in earlier court, which demanded that the CBI say sorry to Aakar Patel for stopping him at the Bengaluru airport, this time the order says that while Mr. Patel can fly abroad, an apology is not necessary. The CBI has alleged that Aakar, as the head of Amnesty International, is in violation of FCRA rules. Aakar Patel himself has done a countersuit against the CBI, holding it in contempt of court. There's, of course, a lot to unpack here. Aakar Patel, when he speaks, is speaking not just for himself, but for an entire organization. And he has argued that he was stopped because he's written a book that has been extremely critical of the Prime Minister and the government. Aakar Patel joins us now. First responses to the fact that you can, in fact, fly abroad. Are you planning to leave the country for your sort of scheduled conference very soon, or what are you planning?
So I hope to travel. I had got invitations from some universities abroad, which was the basis on which I had applied to a court in Surat, which had my passport. This is another case which a BJP legislator had filed against me in 2020. And after I secured my passport and got my visas and went to the airport, that is when I realized that I wasn't allowed to travel because of another case that the CBI had filed against me. Now that the court has said I can fly, I hope to be able to do so. I've missed one of the conferences that I was supposed to be in, but I've got a couple of more lined up and I hope to be able to fly soon.
Do you believe you were stopped because you are personally very critical of the Modi government, or because the government doesn't like amnesty, or because you think the charges are pretty serious as well, and we'll get to them later in the conversation?
I'm not sure, and I don't want to speculate, but my sense is that what the CBI did was wrong. That per law they can stop either those people who do not submit themselves to the investigation, and I most certainly did. I went each time the CBI called me, or those people who are absconding, which I'm not. So, given the fact that I met neither of the conditions that is required for being on the LOC, I'm not sure why it is that I was put on it. And I can only attribute this to malice. However, this is an opinion and it's not based on any specific information that I have, Ms. Dutt.
One of the things you actually said was this sort of rhetorical question. You said, "Am I Nirav Modi or Vijay Mallya?" The point you were making was that you were simply going outside India for a conference, and you were going to come right back. You had no intention of leaving your home in Bengaluru and leaving for good. Why do you think the CBI made that argument in court? I was going through some of their comments in court, and their lawyers argued that you're very well connected outside India, suggesting that you may not even come back.
I don't think the CBI knows that having finished my tenure at Amnesty, my term ended at the end of November 2019, after which a year later, the Enforcement Directorate came and froze the accounts one more time, the third sort of attack from the union government on it. This is in the period when I was not there. I returned to the organization specifically to take this case on. Not only have I no intention of leaving the country, I have returned to Amnesty specifically to fight the case. So I think it's, to my mind, slightly absurd that I be accused of being a flight risk when I want to take this case on, which I will and I have.
So you're saying that although your term had otherwise ended with Amnesty, you have returned as the chair of Amnesty International because you would like to argue that this is a case or a set of allegations born from malice. So let me ask you, as much as you can, within the bounds of law, given that the case is ongoing, to respond to the central allegation that 36 crores has been received by Amnesty International in violation of the FCRA rules. How do you respond to that, Mr. Patel?
There is no violation, which is why you find that while the organization had been raided the first time in 2018, there was nothing was filed formally, and so far as I know, we still haven't been charged formally. And the fact is that on the same set of transactions, we've had one raid from the Enforcement Directorate in 2018, another raid in 2019 from the CBI when I was there, a third freeze by the ED in 2020. Purely using the power of the state and those agencies which can carry out freezes without any requirement for producing evidence. And that is what the union government has done. And I think that it is necessary. So the history of amnesty in India is that it began with George Fernandez in 1970, about 50 years ago, and episodically has been in and out of this country, run always by George was the first and I am the current. So we don't see ourselves as a foreign body. The fact that the government sees us that way is of no concern to us. I think it is time that we show the government a sense of defiance and a sense of making sure that the government follows the same rules and laws that it insists that the rest of society follows. I hope that with this day in court that I have had the last 10 days or so, we can extend that to what is being accused of the larger organization. I don't think there is a single thing that the government has said against Amnesty which is true, and this will turn out to be the case in court. We are not an organization that does money laundering, which is the primary allegation against us. I don't think that this is the sort of organization that the world sees as doing things like money laundering.
What I am able to make out in the charges is that there are two allegations. One, that Amnesty International has received money, or affiliated trusts have received money that were not given clearance to be registered, and they've received money from outside India. And secondly, that foreign contributions have been made directly that are also in violation of the rules. For you to argue that this is Amnesty is not even a foreign organization, that doesn't address the allegation they're putting or laying at your doorstep, which is that you've received money from outside India in violation of the Foreign Contributions Act.
No, the law is very clear, both on the side of corporate affairs, we are registered as a company, and on the side of the trusts, which we are also registered. There is no question that we would violate the law. And I have absolutely no doubt, and this is the reason that I have come back to the organization, that once we are in court, we'll be able to show this.
Given that the court twice now has basically taken your side against the CBI, once asking the CBI director, no less, to apologize to you, this court now saying you can leave, but let's drop the bit about the apology. Do you believe that, therefore, this is actually a test that, several of our institutions are still, working in a way that, some people would say, you would argue they are not?
So I think India is in an interesting space. We are not China. So we do have this liminal space where we do have some freedom of expression. Of course, it is a fact that freedom of expression is criminalized in India, whether through laws like defamation or criminal contempt or through sedition or through 153A. So there are many laws that the state has in its quiver and which it uses quite liberally to make sure that we don't really have free speech. But notionally, constitutionally, legally speaking, we do have it. And I think that space needs to be exploited. I think that we are going through a period in our history when it is not just the political sphere that will determine the trajectory of this nation over the next decade and a half. I think that civil society and the media have a large role to play in where it is that we are being led to, given the circumstances of the present time, and where we will end up. And I think that as part of civil society, as part of Amnesty, I believe that we should stand up and make sure that we play our role. And that part of that role includes engaging whatever parts of the state we can, whether it is the law, whether it is the police, whether it is the bureaucracy, whether it is the diplomatic corps, and to make sure that India returns, which it is not at the moment, to a constitutional path where the rights of all are respected and the state doesn't bully its own citizens in the way that it's doing now.
So let's unpack a little bit of this. One of the arguments you made is that you were targeted, you believe, because of a book you wrote on the Modi years. And you say that the lookout notice or the lookout circular came shortly afterwards, a few weeks afterwards, after like the case being kind of in seemingly in cold freeze for several months. Why do you feel that? Why do you feel that this book, The Price of the Modi Years, where you actually argue that the popularity of the prime minister, which obviously is undiminished, does not come from his performance? That's the central sort of argument in this book. Why do you link this book to the fact that you were stopped from flying abroad and, in fact, to the larger set of cases against you and Amnesty?
I have no facts, but I do have a chronology. So we were raided when I was at Amnesty by the CBI in November 2019. The last time I spoke to them, which is when I was summoned in December 2020, was 15 months before I was put on the LOC. But it was 6 weeks after my book came out. Now, to my mind, it appears to be the case that this had something to do with the timing of the release of the book. I could be wrong. And this is purely speculation because, as I said, I don't have any material to be able to confirm this. But I do believe that those people who speak against what is going on in India today, particularly activists, particularly those activists who are engaged in issues such as, say, Kashmir or UAPA, are specifically gone after by the state. And it would not be surprising to me to find out that this was indeed the case, that the reason why whatever has been happening against Amnesty, against those people who work there, has been happening because of the fact that they're speaking out on these specific issues, in my case with the book.
Now, the book actually looks at, I think, 58, please correct me if I'm wrong, different benchmarks, different sort of, global barometers. And you say that on most of them, or almost on all of them that you name, India's actually declined in several qualitative appraisals. Yet, you see, as we have seen in the most recent set of assembly elections, the BJP juggernaut rolls on. Uh, do you not think that it is then simplistic to link this only to, let's say, Hindutva or identity politics? There's a whole bunch of factors here, including, some would argue, a very successful strongman narrative, for example, in Uttar Pradesh, where so many voters speak about Yogi Adityanath's performance on law and order, or sort of microeconomics, welfareism, free rations, bags of free rations with the prime minister and the chief minister's face on them. I'm just keen to get your sense because, before you were the chair of Amnesty International, you've been a journalist and an author of several decades.
Well, I don't deny the popularity of the BJP, but one cannot deny its electoral success. I'm not amongst those who questions the voting process or the EVM. I think that the BJP is genuinely popular. The question is whether or not post 2014 India has declined in governance terms. To my mind, of the 53 indices that I looked at, India had fallen on 49. Of the four that it had risen on, one is 4 years old and one is defunct. There are other indicators, and we don't have the time to go through them, on the economy that says that we are not describing the same trajectory as either the East Asian tigers or China. We are going in another direction. I'll just give you one data point, that the number of people aged 15 and over who are working or looking for work in the United States is 60%. In China and Vietnam, it's 75%. In India, it's 40%. It was 52% when Mr. Modi took over. There are 5 crore fewer people working today than were working in 2014. And this is government data. Though 12 crore more people came into the workforce. So this is the record on the side of the economy. And I don't think that because there is a lack of acknowledgement of this, I don't think that we are going to be able to correct it. I have no problem with the fact that voters might have a different view than the one I have taken, to say that either on welfare or on free grain or on security, they're doing better than they were in 2014. That's not what the data suggests. It would be foolhardy for me, given the fact that the Congress won several decades from the 50s to the 80s. national level elections when the GDP growth rate was 2.5%. So I don't think that we can attribute economic success, and attribute political success purely to the way that the economy is managed. But my book shows, I believe, that since 2014, we've gone down a path which will be difficult for us to come away from, not just on the side of the economy, but also on the side of society.
Do you do you recognize that for a lot of people, and because I found this when I was reporting COVID, there's a sense or a willingness to give a lot of benefit of doubt to the Modi government. Remember, this is a party that won after demonetization in Uttar Pradesh, and this is a party that has won after the second wave in Uttar Pradesh. It has to tell us something.
I think that Mr. Modi is one of the most trusted and most charismatic leaders we've had ever in our history. I wouldn't be surprised, though I have no data on this, if he were the most trusted ever, including Mr. Nehru. So I think that because of his personally acquired, personally built charm and charisma and his ability to connect with very large numbers of people, he does have the ability to bring in voters, even in those states where his party is not particularly popular. I don't think one can deny that, and the numbers show that he is able to add just pure arithmetic would show us that when Mr. Advani took up Babri, the BJP was in single digits nationwide. So Babri took the BJP into double digits, 18%. Mr. Modi's doubled that. Mr. Vajpayee never had more than 24%. The BJP is now at more than 34% in most polls nationally, and much more than that, given its success in 2019 and especially in UP in 2022.
Can you recall for our audience that may not know this dimension to you, and I kind of remember it from a snatches of a very old conversation about the time that you went to Gujarat to interview or to meet Mr. Modi when he was then Chief Minister of Gujarat, and I think it was an on-record interview. What do you remember about that encounter?
He was quite friendly, and I met him more than once. He held my hand and sort of swung it in the way that Gujarati men do, and he sort of giggled and called me a communist, I think. But he was warm, which he normally is. I went to him another time and I read out some poems by this man called Wali Muhammad Wali, who's great, the first poet of Urdu, who was buried in Ahmedabad, just outside the police commissioner's office. And on the 28th of February 2002, a mob broke down. They tore down the tomb and they sort of paved the road over. And I read those. I read a couple of those poems. You know, there's one called Dar Firak-e Gujarat, which is on parting from Gujarat, where he expresses his love for the state. And another one is Tarif-e-Sheher Surat, which is my town. And I said that this is the kind of man that we should respect and we should try and make sure that justice is done to him. And he said yes. And then while I was leaving, he said that, well, we're not really sure whether that was his tomb or not. So we won't do anything. So these are the sorts of things that I recall. Very high levels of certitude, very high levels of confidence. As we've seen, I think that part to him has not changed.
I noticed that on Twitter, your response to your case, unlike a lot of other activists, has been humorous, cheeky almost, some would say. You tagged the Home Minister in a tweet where you said "Ima bounce," which has many different connotations in today's mediascape. What makes you approach this with humor?
I suppose it's the kind of person I am. We don't have to be serious all the time, and certainly I don't feel the need to be serious all the time. And it's fine. Life will throw some stuff at you, and there'll be good days and there'll be bad days. We may as well make the most of the good days.
So let me ask you in the end a serious question. There's a real sort of jousting going on who is the arbiter of human rights. And I raise this because we're at a very interesting intersection of conversation between the United States and India, where the United States actually talks about the human rights record of India, and the foreign minister turns around in a different context and says, we, that is Indians, are also very concerned about the human rights record of the United States of America. And I personally found the sort of restoration of that asymmetrical uh, power balance quite interesting and quite compelling. And I have a feeling that a number of Indians, while very comfortable criticizing and debating at home, do not like to be lectured on human rights by the Americans or by anybody else. How do you see this very interesting kind of balance of power that seems to be shifting? India is pushing back. You may not agree on the basis of its pushback, but do you agree with the principle of its pushback?
No, I think India, as the most populous democracy in the world, we have the right and we should lecture other nations on their human rights record, especially the US. There is no reason for us not to. We are a signatory to the UDHR, to the ICCPR. We claim democratic values. We should make sure that whenever a nation violates human rights within its territory, we point it out. Equally, we should be open to other nations doing the same to us as well. The problem with this specific exchange is that it comes in a context that you will remember, and some of your viewers might also, that Mr. Modi was prevented for some years from visiting the US. That was because of sanctions that had been levied on him specifically through a body called the USCIRF, which is a bipartisan body which examines religious freedom across the world every year. For the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021, India has been put on the countries of a particular concern list. And the body has recommended sanctions against specific individuals in India. Neither the Trump administration, which was leaving in 2020, nor the first year in the Biden administration did the State Department take these up. But there is a danger that they might. And I think that if we think that we can combat this by saying things about the US, that's fine. We should. But we should be concerned about what the world is saying about what is going on in India. We've got laws targeting Muslims in a way that we've never had in our history. That you've got specifically an adult woman's testimony that she married of free volition is insufficient evidence for the Indian state in 7 states run by the BJP, where interfaith marriages between Hindus and Muslims have been banned. Marriages, including those with children, can be undone by the state. I don't think that in a democratic space, such laws have a place. And the world will notice that. The world has a good view of us. The world sees India as a well-meaning but chaotic place. That's the view they've always had of us. The problem is that what has happened since 2014 and particularly since 2019 is that we have introduced a series of laws and policies that are menacing. And they bear the state's fangs at our own citizens. If
But
we believe that
I'm sorry, I'm jumping in there, but I just want to remind everybody the UAPA, now used in a lethal sort of way, is a gift of the Congress years. I just wanted to remind everybody of that.
Absolutely. I think that many of the laws that we are faced with, including the UAPA, including rights that are taken away from the Adivasis, are the gift of the Congress. There is no question. The issue is that there are religion-specific laws that India has introduced post 2019, that on the issue of citizenship, on the issue of marriage, specifically policies that stop Muslims from praying in spaces allocated to them by the state, stopping Muslims from wearing, women from wearing what they choose to wear in college. These are not things that the world will look away from. And we will not get away by saying that we were bad in the past as well and you didn't tell the Congress that they were bad. The world is concerned with what is happening in India in 2022. They don't really care about what went on here in 1965. And I think that it is incumbent on us to correct ourselves. If we believe we have the ability and are fully sovereign enough to tell the world to get lost, that's fine. If we don't have that ability, we should make sure that the world doesn't say these things, because it will. The only way to stop the world from meddling in our affairs in this issue is to make sure we don't pass these laws. The world will go away on this. They might still come on other things that are not linked to human rights. But I believe that the world will pay a closer look to India, because what is happening here is of concern.
Yeah, I mean, we need to have a longer conversation about, what the place or the rights of the world is, but I think certainly what you flag on interfaith marriages in particular is of deep and alarming concern, because it takes away the agency of women, which is something that matters to me personally enormously. Finally, on a slightly lighter note, because you have said that, one may as well laugh at life when it throws you a few lemons. If you were to meet the Prime Minister again, let's say in your home state of Gujarat, accidentally bump into him somewhere at a friend's house, at a shadi, what would you like to say to him, or what might you say to him?
I would go through some of the data and say that we need to correct what we are doing in two ways. One is on the side of the economy, and I think that what we've done to ourselves, and I don't think many people realize that in 2014, when Mr. Modi took over, India was roughly 50% in front of Bangladesh in per capita GDP, roughly $1,600 per capita for us, roughly $1,100 per capita for them. They've gone in front of us. We have to acknowledge that. This is government data. Nobody is denying it. Where have we gone wrong? We have to ask ourselves. We can only find solutions to problems that we acknowledge. If we don't talk about the problem, we'll never find a solution. That's one. The second is, what is the end state of the Hindu majoritarian ideology that we have adopted? Where is it? What 10 years from now, 15 years from now, what is the end state? We have excluded Muslims politically successfully. There is no Muslim chief minister in India. In 15 states in India, there is no Muslim minister at all. In 10 states in India, there is one Muslim minister normally who's given a minority affairs. Of the 303 Lok Sabha MPs that the BJP has, none is a Muslim. In the last Lok Sabha, 282 MPs, none was a Muslim. To what end? We have excluded them, fine. Why? What happens 10, 15 years from now, after we have expended all these laws and this energy on them, after we've done all the hijab, love jihad, beef, namaz, and all of that, what is the end state for this country? And if there is no end state, if Hindutva is not aimed at any particular end state, why don't we end it here and go back to a normative, constitutional, democratic space that many of us thought we had been for the last 55, 65 years. Of course, it was episodic. Of course, it was bad. I have no love for the Congress. But I'm saying that we were not ranged entirely against a minority full-time as we are today. And I don't know whether he'll give me so much time, but these are the things that I'd like to say to him.
Okay, I'd love to be what is it called, a wallflower on that meeting if it were ever to take place. Aakar, thank you. You've had a good day in court. The court has said that you must be allowed to travel outside India if you so choose to, and you have made it clear that you will not just come back, but you have rejoined Amnesty to take the charges head on, and those will be then adjudicated on by a court of law, that same court of law and due process that has given you interim justice today. So thank you very much, Aakar Patel, for joining us, and have a good trip to wherever you're headed, and take care.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dutt.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.